Hello, my name is Alex Younger, and this is a video from my interpersonal communications course. I'm here to tell you today why you should all go out and buy a comic book. Before we get started, in case anything goes wrong, as always, keep calm and call Superman. I'm going to explain how comic books apply to movies, and how this all applies to you. According to IMDb, the Internet Movie Database, Marvel's Avengers grossed $623 million. Box Office Mojo reports that money breaks down to 76 million tickets sold at the box office in America alone. So if you're one of 76 million Americans who watched Marvel's Avengers in the theaters, this speech applies to you. Because buying comic books drives these blockbuster movies being created. And more than that, buying a comic book is a vote for which movie gets created next. Before we get into how they all connect, I have to explain how comic books nearly died. In the end of the last century, in the 80s and 90s, comic book subscription and readership was on the decline. Marvel was on the rocks, and so they licensed several of their characters to other companies to create movies out of. They licensed the X-Men to 20th Century Fox, and they licensed Spider-Man to Sony Entertainment. The money from these licensing and the movies they created kept Marvel alive long enough so that early in this century, Disney bought Marvel out for $4 billion. This gave Marvel the money and the time and the power to create the movies themselves. The movies that had been created before by Sony Entertainment and 20th Century Fox didn't receive great reviews in the theaters. But they were being created by people who didn't know and appreciate and have the passion for the source material like Marvel does for its own. Which brings me to my second point. Comic book movies, when done well, are good. As I mentioned before, Marvel's Avengers made $623 million by itself. And how that ranks against movies of all time. Box Office Mojo is a website that breaks down movies and inflates the ticket prices so they're all the same. In terms of tickets sold, Gone with the Wind is still number one at 202 million tickets sold. This is including re-releases, and they have Marvel's Avengers at 27. 27 out of all the movies ever sold in the box office in America, which is amazing. And that movie, Marvel's Avengers, broke $200 million in their opening weekend. They had an estimated production budget of $220 million. So in the first weekend it was released, it almost earned back all the money it took to create it. By the end, they'd made $620 million, which means that if you put $1 into the film, you got back almost $3. Which also means that they're going to keep making these movies. So, why should we buy comics? Because it keeps creating movies, and the comics you buy matter. On Comic-Con, the Comic Chronicles, tough to say, they broke down the top comic books sold in the 21st century, that is from the year 2000 going forward. Number one was The Amazing Spider-Man. Marvel can't make Spider-Man movies because they've licensed the character, and the character is still making great movies. After that, it has The Walking Dead, which is an Image comic, doesn't belong to Marvel or DC either one. After that, it was The Civil War. The Civil War is mostly an Avengers title, it's a crossover title. And so they took the number 3 comic and made one of the number 1 movies of this decade. After that, we had Captain America, who we've already had a movie of, and then another Avengers crossover. After that, we have Batman, And then we have Infinite Crisis, which was a DC crossover. And then it goes into the Justice League and Superman. Which brings us to another point. The success that Marvel's created in these movies has opened the door for DC to try. They've already succeeded with Man of Steel, and they're moving on towards creating a Justice League movie of their own. If you are curious, Thor by himself comes in at number 47. So they're taking these movies in the order of popularity. Every comic you order raises the popularity of that comic line. So if there's a character you absolutely love, or a storyline you absolutely love, buy it, and it's got a better chance of becoming a movie. So in short, comics are good. They're good by themselves. They're one of the best expressions of American art. And right now, with Marvel and DC competing, they're making excellent movie adaptations. Buying a comic is a vote for which movie you want to see. So previously, the way movies were made was you would write a book. That book would be made into a movie. If the movie sold well enough, it sometimes got a comic book. And that works well for movies, but terrible for comic books. What the Marvel buyout and the current run of comic movies is doing is now you create a comic book and it gets made into a movie. This has led to a rebirth of comics, which I, for one, being a huge nerd, think is a great thing. So, if you love movies, if you love great movies, buy a comic book, drive the industry, and we'll get many more excellent movies. Thank you for attending my speech and have a wonderful day.